Thank you, Donald, and welcome everyone to the DETAC National Community of Practice April webinar. We are delighted to have you here, and we are even more delighted to take a deeper dive into supporting people with brain injuries and achieving competitive integrated employment. I'm going to briefly describe myself before I take a deeper dive into the agenda. I am a Latinx woman under the age of 40. Today, I am wearing a black long sleeve button down shirt. I have dark brown hair that is pulled back, and I have some silver loop earrings. I have a virtual background with a letter A for my initial and a plant so that you won't see the clutter in my home. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from an amazing speaker panel. First speaker will be Jill Farrington from the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. She will be our lead moderator. After that, we're going to hear from the North Carolina Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And then we're going to turn it over to our provider, Community Partnerships, Inc. After that, we're going to hear from a self-advocate about his success story and his journey to employment. And then we will open up the panel for a question and answer session. So next slide, please. I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Jill Farrington is a technical assistance advisor with the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators and also serves as a DETAC subject matter expert. She worked in public vocational rehabilitation for 21 years and has focused on brain injury policy and programming for the past 6 years. Jill's career is centered on expanding competitive integrated employment, service delivery, and strengthening public insurance options for people with disabilities. Our next speaker is Alice Farrar, Chief of Employment Services and Program Development with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. She has 30 years of work in the field of vocational rehabilitation and has a wide skill set in the design and delivery of vocational rehabilitation services. She has served in her current capacity for 6 years and leads a team of 11 in the development of programmatic services that meet individual client needs, as well as guidelines established through federal regulation. Carol Collins is a director of vocational services at Community Partnerships, Inc. She has over 20 years of experience in working with individuals with brain injuries. She received her bachelor's from Xavier University and her master's from North Carolina State University. She is also a certified brain injury specialist trainer. Rachel Weber is a cognitive rehabilitation therapist at Community Partnerships, Inc., with over 9 years of experience in working with individuals with brain injuries. She received her master's from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and she is a certified rehabilitation counselor and a certified brain injury specialist. Rachel completed her internship as a therapist working with clients with various mental health diagnoses. And as a CRT, she works with clients with brain injuries to learn or relearn skills that have been compromised as a result of their injury. Thomas Agbemenu has lived with a traumatic brain injury since 2018. He was in a motor vehicle accident and suffered post-concussion syndrome. Prior to his brain injury, Thomas had experience as a photographer and a clinical psychologist in West Africa. Since coming to the US in 2008, Thomas obtained a master's degree in divinity and became a pastor at the Grace of God Church in in Charlotte, North Carolina. He also worked as an assistant librarian at the Union Presbyterian Seminary at the same time as his current job, and he began receiving services by BIS in June 2021. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jill from NASHA, who will moderate this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I am, again, Jill Farrington. I'm with the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, and we shortened that by calling it NASHA. And I am a white woman in my mid-50s. I'm wearing a blue and white top today, and I have medium-length blonde hair. My pronouns are she and her. And we're really excited to be here today to showcase a program that's been specifically designed for people with brain injuries who are seeking employment. And I'd like to just say that A number of us that work at NASHA, we spend time in states talking to our partners about their brain injury state plans or strategic plans, the roadmaps that they want to set for achieving brain injury quality of life for the people that are in their state. And to do those state plans, they do needs assessments first, almost all the time. And what we see at NASHA on just about every needs assessment that comes across our desk is the desire for employment on the part of people with brain injuries. People want to work, just like all of us do, and they may just not know where to start. They may not know what's going to happen with their benefits if they go to work, or they may not know what to do if they experience a bump in the road. So we're really happy to talk with you all today and bring in these guests from North Carolina to talk about a program that was crafted to really try to meet these needs of people with brain injuries in their state. So we are hopefully before the end of today going to help you recognize the types of ways that you can build resources and advance employment for people with brain injuries. If we do a good job of that, you're going to really understand the program's design for people with brain injuries. And you're going to hear that from three different perspectives: the public vocational rehabilitation perspective, service providers, and then a person with lived experience who has gone through this program himself. And finally, we want you to walk away with a good understanding of the components that have been thought through for this program. So if you think that there may be opportunity and avenue in your state to create something unique like what you hear about North Carolina, you've got a good sense of what has worked for that state. Okay, next slide, please. These are the three partners that are here today to deliver this work and this webinar. The National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. We are a membership organization and we assist state government in promoting partnerships and building systems to meet the needs of, but more importantly, to improve the quality of life of people with brain injuries. And then again, as you heard earlier, we're joined by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and then Community Partnerships, Inc., the service provider that's doing this innovative work. Next slide. Before we go there, we have been really lucky at NASHA to work with the DETAC and to develop some resources, and we wanted to give you a quick highlight of them. Sometimes we throw this at the end of a presentation, but there's really important Q&A to happen at that time, and we don't want to throw it to you at the very end. But we've worked with the DETAC to develop 3 resources that we think are a nice suite for helping people with brain injuries consider employment. The first is You Can Work After Brain Injury, Improving Your Employment Success. This is a document that my colleague Maria Crowley and I developed that is a great handout for giving to a person who's just in the beginning stages of thinking about going to work. They may be on the fence, they may not know where to start, they may not know if they should want to work, and this we think is a great resource that you can save and print and give out to people as you're having work conversations. The second one, Becoming a Champion for Employment, Guiding People with Brain Injuries Towards Work, was developed for service providers, case managers, and others in the community that are our champion referral sources to employment programs. You may not know for sure how to talk about employment to a person you serve, or you may want to know what are all of the different avenues to help somebody start looking at a pathway to employment. And this is for you. This is a document that really helps you have a conversation with an individual about the prospect of starting an employment journey. And then the final one is Considerations for Working with Individuals with Brain Injury. This is a guide specifically for employment service providers. So that might be for vocational rehabilitation counselors or direct service providers that are doing placement in the community or employment network staff. We wrote this guide so that it gives you tools, strategies and approaches for really increasing the employment outcomes for people with brain injuries. So know that these are all on the DETAC website. There's links in this presentation that will be coming out to you afterwards. Okay, next slide. Brain injury and employment, why it matters. I'm not going to read through this list. A lot of presentations start with this type of information, but on the left side, I think you can all look at the kinds of reasons why employment matters for all, all workers. You may have 3 or 4 that really resonate here for you. Sense of purpose and identity, income, promoting community inclusion and cohesion and productivity. Whatever the reasons are, they're there for people with disabilities and they're there for people with brain injuries. So that's why we're here today. That's what inspires us. And on the right side of this slide are the specific ideas that we have about how you can improve the employment picture. And quickly, they include things like messaging that work really does matter. And it's not just possible, it's waiting for people with brain injuries to, in most cases, to think about going back to work, whether that's returning to a former occupation that they held before an injury or retraining to go into a new type of work. So messaging that comes from all around the community, that you can do this, there's resources, I'll help you get connected, I'll help you along the way if you run into a bump in the road. So that's a key way. The next is to have a brain injury informed staff to provide services. And in case you didn't know, every state in the country has a lead agency on brain injury. And these connections, these individuals are great to get in touch with, to ask for brain injury training for staff if you've got an organization that could use this type of brain injury training. If they can't provide it themselves, they'll point you in the direction of a great resource for getting brain injury training for staff. The next is individualized interventions. And here I just want to mention that I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And when I worked with people with brain injuries, a lot of times I would just jump over to the Job Accommodation Network and I would pull down a bunch of strategies and accommodations that work for brain injury. But I didn't always take the time to really understand the person from their person-centered perspective of where they struggle on a day-to-day basis. Because had I done that, I would have better been able to meet their needs and tailor the types of accommodations that we were seeking to really what was most prevalent for them in their day-to-day life. So that's where the brain injury informed services and the training can really be impactful. The next is tailored job placement and on-the-job supports. And again, you heard me mention that sometimes we see very successful return to work approaches. And then we know that VR can be extremely helpful, as well as other employment organizations, for helping people to think outside the box about what they can do in the next part of their life, living with a brain injury. And the final is ongoing supports. Now, we know that in most states, 2 out of 5 roughly have brain injury waivers, and only a portion of those have supported employment included on their waivers. So there are some gaps for paid ongoing supports. But through the creative use of work incentives, through thinking a little bit about natural supports, through thinking about the vocational rehabilitation's post-employment services door that people can go back into if they need to, we can put together ongoing supports for people despite there maybe not being a brain injury waiver with supported employment services. Okay, next slide. This is where I get the honor to turn it over to Alice Farrar from the North Carolina Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Program to talk about the program we found in their state that is really unique in the way that it's serving people with brain injuries. Alice?
Thank you so much, Jill. It's good to be with all of you this afternoon. As Jill said, I'm Alice Farrar with the North Carolina Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. I am a white woman, and today I'm wearing a floral print blouse in creams, pinks, browns, and I've got on some purple framed glasses. So glad to be with you and share with everyone this really cool partnership that we have in serving our brain injured individuals in North Carolina. Let me start first by just kind of laying a little bit of background. You know, the North Carolina Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is under our Department of Human Services, and like all of our public VR programs, we've always supported competitive integrated employment. Over the years, we've increased our partnership with other divisions within our department, such as our Division of Health Benefits is or our Medicaid program, and our Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services, which is where our TBI services are housed. Sometimes we felt like we were a pretty well-kept secret. Not anymore. We really, through department and state initiatives, VR is really an integral part of employment efforts across many different facets. We have a newly adopted Olmstead plan, which addresses the value of employment in the lives of individuals. We've increased our partnership with other divisions to promote CIE, or competitive integrated employment, with these other divisions, and we work really closely to make sure that our policies align with each other. Our governor signed Executive Order 92 in 2019 and promotes state government as a model employer for individuals with disability. And finally, our state is working really hard to promote CIE for individuals who haven't chosen CIE in the past. So this won't be new to many of you, but it's systems change work, and it's really exciting. It's as exciting as it is tough, and really requires quite a bit of cross-divisional effort to ensure positive outcomes. So we really have increased our partnership across many different divisions to promote employment for people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So just to kind of give a little bit of history of how this evolved in North Carolina, in 1986, we introduced supported employment as part of the Rehabilitation Act that was passed that year. I'm sure that many of our states on the line did the same thing. And we really have had a robust supported employment program since. In 1992, the state received a demonstration grant through the Department of Education known as Project Hires, and it was the beginning of our services that were tailored specifically for people with traumatic brain injury. As time went along and that grant ended, VR became the sole funder of these services. During this time, these were authorized services, so based on hourly service. They were a little bit, while we had a really, really great partnership with Community Partnerships, whom you'll meet in just a minute, it kind of felt like services were drawn out. We didn't really know where we needed to end the service and move into the next phase of service. And it felt like we needed to add a little bit more structure. So we started a very robust conversation with Community Partnerships to move this service to milestones, where we were identifying well-established chunks of service that have a measurable and specific outcome attached with a payment. We'll dig into that in just a minute, but the core of that program still remains in place today. Next slide, please. Before we jump into what that looks like, I want to talk a little bit about the eligibility for brain injury support services, or BIS, that you'll hear us all refer to for the next hour or so. To be eligible for this service, you have to have medical history that includes documentation of brain injury. We prefer a neuropsychological evaluation within 2 years of a referral for the service, but neuropsychs, there tend to be a very long wait time to get them. So when we have sufficient medical information, we will waive that neuropsychological. We don't want to delay services for individuals if we can move forward with the information that we already have. The individual needs to have a demonstrated need for wraparound supports to achieve CIE or to complete post-secondary training. And you'll hear a little bit more about what those wraparound supports look like. An individual must meet DVRS criteria for serious deficits in at least 3 major functional limitation areas. So we think if an individual needs this level of support, they are considered in our most significantly disabled category. And finally, our brain injury support services are not subject to financial need. So these are services that an individual can receive regardless of any income that they may have. Next slide, please. So our brain injury support services really cover 5 different major areas. And I am only going to go into a little bit of detail because I think that Carol and Rachel will touch on these a little bit more as we move through the presentation. So we've got our cognitive rehabilitation strategy. It's a very it's tailored to the individual to help identify compensatory strategy to address functional areas in where our individual is having trouble. Therapy and counseling is included in this, and it's a intervention needed to assist an individual in adjusting to life and difficulties that they're having after their brain injury. Case management has been a missing component in our system, and so we're happy that there is this component in here. It's to help coordinate and manage all aspects of moving from where an individual is today to employment. Next slide, please. Occupational information and exploration. So this is the provision of training and pre-vocational skills necessary to be prepared to re-enter the workforce. And then our last phase in this program is job placement and supports. And we feel like with a targeted focus in these 5 areas with the same team, our clients are able to move through these different areas and reinforce the newly developed compensatory strategies so that they're met with success at the end. Next slide, please. So let's dig into a little bit and look at what our milestones look like. Our first milestone is an assessment with a report. It includes up to a 45-day assessment to assess needs and capabilities. You can see the rates that we pay for this service. This is an intense time where our team at Community Partnerships is able to create a plan specifically for an individual to give them the exact things that they need in order to be successful. Our second milestone is cognitive rehabilitation and career exploration part 1. At the end of the assessment, a goal plan is written, and the goal plan is written in such a way where we can sort of determine when they've completed about half of the plan, right, or half of the goals on the plan. Once they're sort of around that 50% mark, a payment is made. We call that milestone 2, which is part 1 of the cognitive rehab and career exploration. Milestone 3 is the second 50%. If we have some time to talk about how Community Partnerships and VR kind of partnered together to figure this out, it took us a minute to figure out how to come up with those 2 milestones, how to break it up so that they were able to have some cash flow during this very long period of time to achieve these goals. Milestone 4 is our independence, our employment and independence. And this is the phase of the program in which the CPI team is conducting job development and really working on the placement for that individual and supporting them through that initial training and stabilization phase. And then finally, our milestone 5 is 90 days of successful employment. And at that point, VR closes the case and long-term funding support needs are funded, hopefully through our mental health agency. Next slide, please. So just to kind of give you a snapshot of our successful closures over time, our brain injury support services remain small. We don't have high numbers of individuals that complete this this service for various reasons. We'll talk about those in a minute. We started our milestone program in 2015, and you can see a pretty rapid increase in our successful closures in 2017, and that we stayed pretty steady. And then you can see our COVID dip that we had in 20 and 21. I'm sure many of you have experienced the same dip over time. But the service has been very very much a success for us. And we'll talk, if you can go on to the next slide. I think there's one more. Thinking of one of the reasons that people might say they don't want to consider the BIS program is because it doesn't go straight to employment, right? We're really taking some time to help people develop strategies so that they can be more effective at work and more effective in their everyday life. And that takes a little bit of time. And sometimes they just don't always want to take the time to do that. Before I turn it over to Carol and Rachel to kind of dig into more specifics of what the service looks like, I can tell you that we would love to expand our brain injury support services. It has proven to be very challenging to expand for various reasons. We look at our caseloads to see where we might have a high concentration of individuals with traumatic brain injury, and counselors say, yep, I got these referrals, and then the referrals are kind of slow to trickle in a new area. That's one of the main areas that we're seeing with difficulty in expanding is you have to have a certain amount of business for you to stay in business. We are looking at some remote service delivery for brain injury support services. We have one kind of test going on right now in the western part of our state, so we're excited to see where that takes us. Carol and I recently spoke about an individual who had a brain injury and has been successful in employment, but they're ready for a new job, and how can we use our brain injury support service to help them obtain new employment. They don't really need to go through the cognitive retraining again. Those strategies continue to work. They just need help finding new employment, which happens to all of us over the course of our careers. And then I think the other thing that is just really vital, and Jill kind of touched on it when we first started talking, was we need ongoing professional development for our VR staff. And we were able to participate in a national survey, and it was very interesting to kind of hear the responses from our staff about where they really are hungry for more knowledge on how to provide more effective services for people with brain injury and how they might need to enhance their own expertise in this area. And with that, I think I am going to send it to Carol and Rachel.
Thank you, Alice. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Collins. I am in my office, so behind me you'll see a file cabinet and a picture and some books, binders. I'm wearing a black shirt, a black cardigan, and a light green scarf. I have blonde hair, straight, and I'm actually really excited to be here today, so thank you. Next slide, please. So Alice and I are kind of talking about similar things. We're just kind of both coming from a little bit different of a different places. I know someone had said it's hard to hear me, so I apologize. Is that better? I hope it is. So like Alice said, the program was originally Project Hires, and it started as a demonstration grant through the Department of Education in 1992. It was a 3-year grant, and it worked with individuals in the school system. One of the stakeholders at the table of that grant was vocational rehabilitation. And at the end of that grant, VR stood up and said, we'll fund this service, but we have to open it up to any age of anyone who has some type of a brain injury. And so at that point in time, it continued as project hires. It was authorization-based funding. And the core of it was to help people develop strategies to compensate for the areas that they're struggling in, with the ultimate goal of going back to work. It has always been a very holistic approach. Our philosophy is that life affects work, work affects life. And when a brain injury occurs, it affects almost every aspect of someone's life. And you have to get in there and you have to work on all those different things for them to be successful and find the happiness that everyone deserves. In the beginning, it really was the kind of rehabilitation, the therapy, the case management, and all the pre-vocational skills that you need to go secure a job. We actually referred, once they finished that part of the project, we actually referred to a supported employment vendor. And so in 2000 and about 2001, the name changed to Brain Injury Support Services. And it stayed the same. And in about 2005, we started having conversations with VR, because one, outcome-based funding was kind of the big thing. Everyone was trying to go outcome-based. They wanted to show what was being done with the state and federal funding. And so we started having conversations about 2005 about how do we go outcome-based. There was also a need across the state of North Carolina. And so we wanted to be able to expand. And so we actually opened up a program in Goldsboro. We opened up a program in Fayetteville. And in those two programs, we actually opened a supported employment program to go with the Brain Injury Support Services program. When you have such a small brain injury support services program, there's not enough need for a full support employment program. And so there were a lot of struggles with that. And so in about 2011, we expanded into Greenville. During this entire time, we were still in Raleigh. We always had a Raleigh program here. And in 2011, we expanded into Greenville. And as we were talking with VR about expansion and how do we bring the employment thing within the BIS program, we actually did a little pilot project within the program and brought the employment piece into our Greenville office. We modeled it after support employment. We had the aspect of job development, helping people secure jobs, the job training, being independent on the job, which is very, it's exactly like stabilization within support employment. And then it moved into the 90-day countdown once someone was independent on the job. It was successful from about 2011 to 2015. And so in our conversations with VR, we were able to, in 2015, go to milestone funding and open up employment in all our offices. And in 2015, we actually opened an office in Winston-Salem and also an office in Charlotte. So we are currently in 4 different areas of the state. Next slide, please. So the goal of Brain Injury Support Services is to help people with sustained brain injury secure gainful, competitive, integrated employment. The program's core is cognitive rehabilitation. It's the area that we probably spend the most time with. It's helping them develop strategies to compensate for the areas they're struggling in. We also do a lot of therapy. I would say in the past, prior to the pandemic, we actually did group therapy and individual therapy. Since the pandemic, we have not gone back to any group services. So everything right now is individualized. We do all the pre-vocational training and then the full employment. We see similar things within the consumers that we work with. For those of you guys that work with brain injury, you know that you see one brain injury, you really are only seeing one brain injury. They're very, very diverse. And so we are constantly working with them and trying to improve kind of some of the things that we're doing. But the things that we see a lot of memory issues. We see a lot of processing speed issues. We see a lot of attention and concentration issues. We also see a lot of depression and anxiety issues. Those are probably some of the things that we see pretty consistently. We have a lot of individuals who have great support systems and don't have a lot of case management needs. We also have individuals that have no one in their life and no support system and need a lot of help accessing the services that are out there in the community for them. As you guys know, the systems are not always easy to navigate, and when you have someone who has a brain injury, sometimes they can really struggle with navigating the system and need that support. Next slide, please. So the program details. So eligibility, everybody has to have some type of a documented brain injury. They have to have a vocational goal, and they have to be at least 16 years of age or older. The majority of people are usually 18. It's rare that we will see a 16 or a 17-year-old in our program, as the school system does a really good job in North Carolina with the individuals that are 16 and 17 with a brain injury. And within the population that we serve here in North Carolina, I would say about 60% of the individuals we see have what we would say a traumatic brain injury, so an external assault to the brain. The majority of them come from car accidents, but we've had beatings, gunshot wounds, a variety of different areas there. About 30% have the traditional acquired brain injury, so an internal assault to the brain. Most of them have been strokes, but we've also seen a lack of oxygen as a result of a near drowning or a drug overdose, attempted suicide, those areas. We also have about 10% that have a cognitive disability, otherwise unspecified. And so within that population, it's been very diverse. We've had individuals with MS, we've had individuals with chronic and acute ethanol abuse, we've had individuals with cognitive disabilities as a result of chemotherapy from breast cancer. We actually had 2 individuals in that category. We've had someone with a neurodegenerative brain disease, so it varies, but I would say the majority that we see are car accidents. Like I said, we have offices in Raleigh, Greenville, Winston-Salem, and Charlotte, and then we work with individuals in all their surrounding areas. So in Raleigh, there's probably about 6 different counties that we work with. In Greenville, there's 2 to 3 different counties. Winston-Salem, there's about 3 different counties that we work in. And then Charlotte, if you guys are aware of Charlotte, it's a very big area, and we serve the majority of people do come from the Charlotte area. Next slide, please. So outcomes, the ultimate goal is competitive employment in the community. And we do have a success rate of about 63%, and that is prior to milestone base 2. So that was looking at about 20 years from 2000, well, about 1996, I think is the data we started looking at up to about 2016. I have not looked at the data since the pandemic hit. There's a lot of other things kind of going on, so I haven't had a chance to update that success rate, but that is a number prior to us going outcome-based and a couple of years of us being outcome-based. Next slide, please. So Alice had talked about the milestones. These are the phases of the program. So phase 1 is assessment, and we're really, really lucky that VR gives us 45 calendar days to complete the assessment. We spend probably about 8 different sessions with each individual. We have to write a huge report at the end of it. We have to send it to VR prior to the assessment staffing so that their counselors have the chance to review the assessment report and make sure that they have any questions answered before moving into the assessment staffing. So that assessment staffing has to occur by the 45th calendar day. Most people will go from phase 1 to phase 2. Phase 2 is called cognitive rehabilitation and career exploration. We also refer to it as CRCE. It is a time period to focus on the concerns that were identified during the assessment and really work on those strategies needed to help compensate for the concerns that were identified. Rachel's going to get into that, so I'm not going to go any more into that. And then phase 3 is employment and job retention. And that really is, like I said, modeled after supported employment. It's helping someone secure a job, maintain that job, be trained on that job, and then maintain it for as long as they want. We have individuals who have been on a job for 10 years. We have individuals that may want to look for a new job after a couple years, such as what Alice was talking about. The consumer who wanted a new job, he actually came back through the program. He didn't need an assessment. He didn't need CRCE, and he just went directly back into employment. Unfortunately, we do have individuals who have some cognitive decline and have to come back through the program to get another job due to the cognitive decline. And normally when there has been cognitive decline, we do go back through the assessment and do cognitive rehabilitation and career exploration again. So it varies for every individual, but it is very individualized based off the needs of that consumer. Next slide, please. So as Alice said, so I'm not going to go into these. These are the different milestones. So they are funded by North Carolina Department of Vocational Services. And milestone 1 is phase 1, which is the assessment phase. Milestones 2 and 3 do tie to cognitive rehabilitation and career exploration. And then milestones 4 and 5 tie to phase 3 employment and job retention. So it could be that someone comes in and goes through all 5 phases. And then there are individuals that come in and might do assessment and then move directly to employment, and they would only go through phase 1 and 3, and we would only be paid for those 3 months. So again, it varies based off the individual and what their needs are and what they're looking for. Next slide, please. This is where you guys are going to get to know Rachel. So I'm going to give her the floor to talk a little bit, and I'll be back at the end to kind of wrap a couple things up.
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Rachel Weber, and to describe myself, I'm a white female in my early 30s. I have shoulder length, light brown hair. I'm wearing big black glasses, and I have on a floral black, white, and pink shirt. And my background, I'm in my office today, so my background is just a blank white board. It's a whiteboard right behind me. So again, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll be reiterating a lot of the things that those who have previously spoken have already talked about. So I do apologize for any repetition. I feel like some areas are meant to be reiterated and stressed because they're really important to our services and what we do and why we do it. And the first slide you'll see here is the title Individualization. And I think it's important that we start here because part of our success as a program and part of what we believe in working with our clients is that each person, as we said, you see one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury. Each client is an individual and their needs are specific for that individual. And we do really try to make sure we tailor and customize all of the services that we provide to our individuals. This also means that the consumers that work with us have to be part of every single process. It's their choice what they do and they do not do. Our job is to provide recommendations. Our job is to help them develop and create and work on the goals that we identify. But it is not our job to do our clients' work for them or to make them work on something. I can sit there and explain why recommend a certain goal be worked on, but it's not my job to force them to do that. So all of our services are based on consumer choice, and all of our services, again, are customized. And part of this process is making sure we're having ongoing communication with our clients, with our funder, with our staff here at BIS. So we do try to make sure we schedule bi-monthly staffings, so every other month, to make sure that the consumer is getting the services they need, that areas are being addressed that are appropriate and needed for that person, and that we make sure progress is continuing. And if we have a lack of progress, why? What's going on there? Was the client having medical concerns or issues, or family concerns or issues, or forgetting appointments and not applying strategies? So we do try to make sure that part of the aspect of individualization is looking at having that open and constant communication. Next slide, please. So I know this has been said a few times, but I'm going to look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. I'm going to be going into more detail about the CRCE portion of our services, which again stands for Cognitive Rehabilitation and Career Exploration Services, so CRCE. You'll hear me refer to that other than Cognitive Rehabilitation and Career Exploration because I will butcher it every time. It's a long title. So The 4 areas that we really work on when we're looking at that middle phase of the program, kind of the service phase in terms of identifying goals and working on goals before helping an individual find and obtain employment, is first and foremost looking at their cognitive needs. We're looking at, as Carol said earlier, we're looking at things such as memory, we're looking at attention, we're looking at processing, we're looking at decision making and problem solving. We're looking at the skills that are going to be needed for a person to be successful in employment as well as their personal life. We also look at the occupational information needs for a person. So we're looking at kind of beginner level employment skills. Can a person arrive on time? Are they able to dress appropriately, speak appropriately, interact appropriately? What are their needs in terms of a job resume? In terms of employment applications, in terms of knowing how to look for jobs, in terms of course, knowing what job to look for, what are they interested in terms of interviewing skills. We really look at all these areas and help individuals address these areas as needed. We look at also the case management needs of a consumer. We're looking at specifically helping to both counsel and guide individuals to identify what are their specific needs and how do we address those within the community. How do we help work on developing natural supports? How do we help individuals on developing the abilities to go out and find resources and advocate for themselves? And how do we, of course, help them offsite as well on behalf of consumers and finding out the things that they need and addressing those. And then, of course, our kind of therapeutic side. We work at, it says group and individual therapy here. As Carol mentioned earlier, due to the pandemic, we do not do group therapy anymore at this time, but we do individual therapy to help individuals to adjust their life after brain injury and all the other aspects that that involves. Next slide, please. I want to go into a little bit more detail about cognitive rehabilitation because I feel like this is the major part of the program. It's where I spend most of my time. And it's a major part of the program that kind of differentiates us between other programs that provide rehabilitation. And just to go over what is cognitive rehabilitation therapy, it truly is a system of services that are designed to help this person specifically address and achieve positive changes by both strengthening, reinforcing, and addressing previous learned patterns of behavior, as well as learning new strategies and new patterns of behaviors to address, again, the area's concerns. Next slide, please. When we talk about cognitive rehabilitation therapy, we're talking about structured treatments that look at the individual's strengths and concerns, the current supports that they have, and helping them to identify strategies and tools to help them be successful. There are 2 types of cognitive rehabilitation that we look at. And the first is restorative, and that's looking at what can we help the individual restore as a result of the brain injury. So it might be processing needs or memory needs. What can we help that individual restore? And then the other side, how can we compensate for concerns? How can we develop and identify what we call compensatory strategies or tools to help that person to apply them and find success with still dealing with the challenges that they're having? Next slide, please. So as we look at cognitive rehabilitation therapy, typical areas that I address on a day-to-day basis, and this list is very short compared to what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, but these touch on the main areas that I work with clients on. We're looking at memory concerns. We're looking at communication concerns. We're looking at processing speed and comprehension concerns. We're looking at focus and attention problems. We're looking at difficulties with executive functioning skills, which is a range of planning and organizing and problem solving. And we're looking at awareness and insight concerns, which is, in my opinion, one of the more challenging areas to address, because if you don't have awareness, it's harder to know you need to apply and implement strategies and tools. So it's a big area that we focus on if we identify that as a need. And we're looking at sensory problems as well. Sensory problems, which might include auditory sensitivity, visual sensitivity, and the like. Next slide, please. when we look at cognitive rehabilitation therapy, CRT, I like to look at it as kind of 6 steps. The first step when we do cognitive rehabilitation is we assess, and we talked about that earlier, is that assessment process. We provide assessments to figure out where the individual at, what are their strengths, and what are the areas of concerns that they're dealing with that are going to impact their employment success, as well as just their overall health and well-being, of course, as that will impact employment success. And we like to make sure we educate the client as best as we are able to. It is important that we're assessing it, we know it, but if the client doesn't understand it or know it, they're not going to be as successful in terms of addressing the areas or issues. The next step we look at in CRT is setting very clear and understandable goals, setting very clear objectives of what is the concern and how do we plan to work on it, and what does it look like when we've achieved it? What does it look like when we have that success? Is it we've learned a certain number of strategies? Is it we've applied it to a certain number of activities or exercises or scenarios? So setting clear goals. Next, we look at how do we actually implement and work on those goals. So whether that's through direct retraining, activities and exercises that we might provide clients, community outings, et cetera, that we might do with clients, and what compensatory strategies can we identify and work on. Once again, we're looking back at those restorative and compensatory techniques and approaches. And then step 5 is application. And when we identify strategies and learn strategies, how do we apply them? How do we have discussions on how to apply these strategies in real life? Are we able to, create mimic scenarios to actually practice that? Where can we go out in the community to actually practice those things? So the application phase. And then, of course, as we talked about with the therapy aspect, it's important to make sure we're addressing the emotional aspects of adjustment, depression, anxiety, and other concerns that come up through having such a major life change. Next slide, please. This slide has just a number of pictures on it, and the first one just says repeat. I'd like to always make sure that when we talk about brain injury, and the reason why we believe that individualized services are needed is because with a brain injury, this is part of the process. This is why sometimes it takes a little bit longer, is because after I learn something, I might not remember it. And so the process needs to be repeated. The process needs to be reiterated. The process needs to be discussed. And we need to make sure that we have systems in place to make sure that individual has support to continue to practice it, to continue to repeat these things throughout their services. This also means that staff have to be communicating with one another and sharing the strategies that are learned and making sure that we are helping the client and setting themselves up for success. And that's the other image that's on this slide, is people building a very colorful bridge to the word success. It takes time, it takes steps, and again, it takes repetition and continued practice to get to that success. And it is okay to take a few steps back, because sometimes that's what's needed to identify the holes where an individual may not be applying the strategies, or where strategies need to be tweaked, so we can make sure we're helping that individual to get to their employment goals. Next slide, please. As we talk about CRT, there always is more to learn and there's more research to do, but research at this point in time has noted the benefits of cognitive rehabilitation, and including individuals in what they call socially stimulating activities, getting individuals to work out their brains and learn compensatory strategies and apply them. It should be noted that research shows that these goals should be holistic, taking into account real world functioning and that person's life and that person's environment and the strengths, again, and concerns that person is dealing with. And that is one of the things we try to do here at Community Partnerships, is make sure we're looking at that holistic realm of a person and making sure we're having those conversations. So if a client has concerns, they can address them with us. Next slide, please. When we talk about application of cognitive rehabilitation, we're looking at, again, that process of assessment, learning and training and teaching, and then application. Again, it goes back to understanding that the process is only successful as we're willing to take that step back, look at the needs and really address them individually and then as a whole. We're learning what needs to be done, we're addressing it, and then we're applying it in a variety of different situations. Ultimately, the goal again being to apply these goals, these tools, and these strategies into employment. Next slide, please. Part of our program, as we talked about with cognitive rehabilitation and what goes into case management as well, is understanding that supports are very, very needed and beneficial for all of our clients in terms of gaining success. One of the things we do here in the Brain Injury Support Services is make sure that we're identifying and developing supports. So for some clients, it's just identifying who are the people in your life that currently support you. For others, it's figuring out that we need to develop those supports. And supports can be numerous. We're talking about supports in terms of maybe social services that are needed to assist clients with financial concerns and medical concerns. We're talking about supports in terms of if the individual doesn't have any family or friends in their area and needs social outlets. So it depends on the individual client's needs as well as their goals and interests. But it really is important that we look at, again, the holistic needs for a person and to help that person develop that social network in terms of where they can apply supports, practice their strategies, and continue to get reinforcement for the things that they're learning. Next slide, please. It's important too, when we talk about the application of cognitive rehabilitation, we kind of go back to the concept of self-advocation and self-determination. Part of our services in this CR process is to make sure that all of our consumers are assisted and helped to develop and identify and practice skills that can help them to apply these tools within their communities with natural supports and independently. So we want to make sure that we're helping our clients to learn how to self-advocate, how to improve and work on their communication skills, and how to work on assertiveness skills. And these skills, again, are practiced and utilized throughout all phases of the program. Okay, next slide, please. I want to just quickly touch on a couple other sections of our CRC phase before I turn it over to Thomas. And that's the therapy portion of our program. When we look at the therapy portion of our program, again, we're looking at how this relates to all sections of CRCE. Individuals with brain injuries, this is oftentimes a huge change for them and their families as they work through and work towards their goals. So we like to make sure that we are both assessing for and addressing problems and concerns in coping skills and frustration tolerance, self-confidence and self-esteem, making sure we're addressing depression and anxiety, making sure that we're working on impulse control and redirecting what might be considered inappropriate behaviors or communications. So within that therapy portion, once again, it's all directed towards making sure we're addressing the areas that will help that individual be successful in employment and in their personal life. Next slide, please. Just to touch on case management one last time, it's very important, and was spoken earlier, that case management is kind of a dying field out there, and we want to make sure that we help every single one of our clients as, again, holistically address their needs. And that includes just examples of financial planning, medical needs, transportation, assistance with benefits. These things will and do impact people's ability to get a job. If they don't have housing, if they don't have a way to get a shower, change clothes, these things will absolutely impact an individual's ability to sustain a job. This is a very intense process and portion of our program, because sometimes we are literally just looking for resources, but that is part of the case management process, is making sure we identify what's out there in the community, that we're constantly having conversations with our providers and discuss the things that are needed and help our individuals find resources that are appropriate. And it can be a process, but we always work with our clients to try to figure out the best way to help them with their case management needs. So next slide, please. Part of where I'm going to start segueing to talk to Thomas, who is a consumer in the Brain Injury Support Services program, is kind of to talk about the occupational information portion. We're looking at, in terms of job preparation. In CRC, we're helping, again, a consumer prepare for and prep for being ready to obtain employment. Part of this process, again, is helping individuals find careers of interest and making sure that we're helping clients find jobs that fit them well. And that's part of the process of that CRC, is to make sure that we're helping them and identifying opportunities to help them identify jobs that they're interested in, build their resume, identify potential job leads when they're ready to start looking for employment. And we do that through a variety of ways, including work trials, volunteering, job shadowing, and other resources. Next slide, please. And within this employment phase, we want to make sure that our consumers are ready to attain a job. Once they are, we do a rapid job search and or assist the individual with the current job that they're already in to be successful in that job. We look on identifying the consumer's interests and strengths and needs for helping them to find appropriate jobs that fit their needs. And we, again, make sure this process is customized for the consumer. What is it that they need? Part-time, full-time? And do they need a specific job that we need to go out there and carve? What accommodations are needed? And we look at that throughout the whole process of finding a job. And I'm going to go ahead, so I'm looking at the time, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Thomas, and I will let him give his description.
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas, and I am a Black African American born in Africa. I have to precise that. I have a black hair cut, and I wear glasses that are framed with a black, and I wear a brown shirt with a tie that is blue and pink in it. Then I wear a gray sweater. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about what I went through when I came here as a candidate for brain injury. My background was given to you before, so I don't think I will have to go through the background again. But I had an accident, is an auto vehicle accident in 2018. It was September 25th, 2018. And I have been struggling, and no one told me that I can go to a place to be helped until I began to call the social services, and they say, oh, talk to Erin Chavez. And I talked to her, and she led me to the service here to be taken care of. So that was when I came to the service, and Rachel and Lindsay and Clarence, all of them, even Carol, who received me the first time, they can testify how messed up I was. I can't think right. I can't process my thinking. I can't do anything. They can't even have an appointment for me, and I will remember it. Like the day will come and they will call me and say, Thomas, where are you? I say, I'm home. I say, what happens? So you have an appointment today? I say, oh, okay, I forget. So when I began to come, Rachel helped me with the app. How do we call it? Yeah, a calendar that I schedule everything on it. So I look through it every morning to see where I'm supposed to be from the morning to the evening. And so I go to them. Since then, I never have an appointment over here and forget. And even I can say that every appointment that we have, even if someone forget, I'm the one who calls before. They say, oh, no, okay, let's change it. etc. So one of the tools that they help me to work on and find and use is the calendar. And also, Rachel helped me to visualize. It was something that we went through, to visualize things, to do association, do strong association and reinforce it. And so that was very helpful to me. I began to practice it, and today I'm better off than when I came in. So if you ask them, they don't even have to talk. I'm remembering words. Even I said that I needed to go to a speech therapist. I didn't go to the speech therapist yet, but I think I get so many things right. So that's what I can say about the work that Rachel did with me. And with Lindsay, she does the work of a case manager with me. And so we call the people, sometimes collection agency, they were just calling me, asking me to pay bills. And there are hospitals, there are water, I think Charlotte Water, yeah. There is electricity, Duke Energy. All those people, they were calling me, and Lindsay was the person who helped me to schedule, to call the people, even doing the social work, like the one that I have to get, Social Security disability. So she began to work with me, and gave that to Rachel, to work with me and get it. So Clarence was the one that I was going to right now. At the beginning, even he came and talked with me and see how he can help me. He came to me at work and look at what I do. I explained things to him. He was involved in doing them with me. He encouraged me, even though I'm planning to leave the place. He made me see that the people love me, and I also love the job first. But maybe I will leave that job because I have so much need that what I'm earning over there is not covering. So yeah, that's what I have to say. I'm so grateful that today I found myself almost up. So, yes. So that's what I have to say.
And I will hand it back over to Carol to wrap us up.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Thomas. The program, the other two things I just kind of wanted to go over with the program really quickly was when we were doing all the negotiations with VR in regard to the program and working with them to try and figure out what the model would look like. One of the things that we talked a lot about was the qualifications of staff. And making sure that you have people qualified in brain injury, that you're sending people to be trained to be CBISs, certified brain injury specialists, and that you have some master level individuals, because the needs of the individuals that we serve are so diverse. So just so you know, we have 12 employees across all locations within the Brain Injury Support Services program. 8 of those 12 have their master's degree. 7 are certified rehabilitation counselors. 5 of our staff currently are certified brain injury specialists. And then we have one who's a certified brain injury specialist trainer. So one of the big things in those conversations with VR was making sure that the model had highly qualified staff providing the services. And one of the things that we were asked when we did this presentation was what are some of the future goals? One of the ways we've been able to have highly qualified staff is our partnerships with the local colleges. We have a really strong partnership with UNC, Chapel Hill, and then also ECU, and they both have masters in rehabilitation counseling, mental health psychology programs. And so we usually have interns from there every year. Right now we have 2 currently. We're interviewing people for next year for internships. And so that's one of the big collaborations that we have. You can do the next slide, please. And so there are other areas that as a state and as an organization we're looking at. Right now there's a big, there's a lot of talk about domestic violence and brain injury. There's a lot of talk about veterans and brain injury. So there's other areas that we are interested in looking at. And one of the big ones is also increasing the number of business partnerships we have in each of our locations across the state. So, and finally, what Alice had talked about was how do we expand this services throughout the state of North Carolina? It is a lot of resources to open in small areas of the state and not always feasible to do so. With the pandemic, we were able to really see how remote services can work. And right now, as Alice said, we are doing a pilot project with a consumer in the western part of the state to see if we can give the resources needed to this consumer and connect with support employment vendors in that area so that they can do the employment piece with support from us in regard to the cognitive rehabilitation. I think that's it for us. So I'll pass it back to Jill for Q&A. I don't know that we have a lot of time left.
Well, it
Thank
looks like we're
you.
right on the scheduled time. And I just wanted to remark on how you all in North Carolina have bundled some of the most critical services for people with brain injuries. You've put them into a package where it's very easy for VR counselors to refer people that fit this kind of a program need. And then you've made it individualized. That's what I'm taking away, is that not everybody has to go through every step of the program. You really look at everybody on a person by person basis. It's not one size fits all. So thank you, VR, CPI, Thomas. You had so many kudos in the chat. I'm going to turn it back to Amy and really appreciate this opportunity to participate in this webinar.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And we really do have such wonderful feedback for Thomas and every one of the speakers. So let's take a dive into the Q&A for about 10 minutes. Just a friendly reminder that if we cannot simply don't have the time to answer your questions, that we do have office hours on Friday. Apologies, it's Good Friday. And Jill will be on standby to answer your questions. The first question that I'm going to read is from Mary Beth. If someone has Medicaid but is not a citizen, would they be able to access BIS and VR services? He was also told that he is not able to access Social Security disability, but had been working prior to his injury, multiple gunshot wounds. So I'll open that up to our speakers. I see Alice ready to answer that.
Yes, so thank you for that question. To be eligible for VR, you have to have documentation that you can work in the United States. So if this individual can provide that documentation, then we're good to go.
Thank you so much, Alice. The next question from Aruna would like to know what are the employment successes in rural versus urban areas? And then she's just thanking you folks for the informative presentation and then asking another question, which is what can consumers and states do when there is no TBI waiver? So that's a two-part question.
I'll take the second part of that question really quickly. North Carolina's TBI waiver just came into play almost 4 years ago. So this program was in place long before the TBI waiver was. So I would say this is very, very lucky because VR has been an excellent funder for us. I feel like it's fit the needs of VR, but it's definitely fit the needs of our consumers. And they've been great partners in allowing us to figure out what that's going to look like. So I would say that if you don't have a TBI waiver, there should be other funding sources to help you serve these individuals too.
I would agree with that, Carol. And as far as the question with regard to urban versus rural, a little bit challenging for us to know in North Carolina, as our brain injury support services are located in more urban areas. Kind of goes back to the fact of both Carol and I kind of talked about the difficulty in it being a sustainable program in a smaller area. That's not to say that that VR hasn't supported people with some transportation to attend BIS services in our more urban areas. So we're not limited to like the city of Raleigh. We could serve people in the Triangle area, which is a much broader area. But again, we are kind of limited in that geography to more urban areas. Carol, would you agree with that kind of assessment?
I would. I mean, Charlotte, Winston-Salem, Raleigh, those are very large urban areas. We are in Greenville. That is a college town. So there are, our college city, I would say, but we do have individuals that are outside of the Greenville area. And so you are in small towns. And we were also in Goldsboro, which would be considered a smaller area as well.
Yeah.
I think when you're in more the rural area, is a lot more networking that needs to be done, in my opinion. It's a lot of who you know and being part of that community more so than in the big cities like Raleigh and Charlotte. So you have to be down there and you have to spend a lot of time. I know that's one of the reasons I think we were successful in Goldsboro. We were there for about 10 years and then we closed the program. But one of the reasons we were successful is all the networking that had to be done and really getting to know the community. More so, you need to do that more so than some of the bigger cities like Charlotte or Raleigh.
And then I just want to tack on briefly, if you don't have a TBI waiver in your state, or if you don't have a TBI waiver for supported employment that includes supported employment in your state, know that nothing we've talked about today is out of bounds. They don't have to come together or go together. But if you're wanting to make change in your state, definitely look into opportunities on your brain injury advisory boards. You may be able to raise the concern and the need within Medicaid stakeholder meetings, and I would just highly encourage that. We have a long way to go to really get the brain injury waivers across the country and to have them really comprehensive so they're meeting the needs.
And just to piggyback, this is Amy from DETAC about Jill's comment. There are opportunities, public comments. Medicaid agencies are required when they're going to submit an amendment to a new waiver, or they are amending a current waiver. They are required to open up a period for public comment. And there's another opportunity for you to really advocate for the creation of that new waiver option. Moving on to some additional questions, we have a ton. Mary Beth says, so clients spend up to 45 days in assessment. What is the average or general rule for time spent in CRT? And she understands that it's different for everyone, but just wants to understand if there's general, like a best practice or rule of thumb for that.
I would say that we'd like for CRCE, so milestones 2 and 3, we hope for about 6 months for them to go through the CRCE process. I'll be honest, we've had people get through as early as 3 months, which is rare. And we have people that have been in over 12 months. It really depends on where they're at, what their needs are, their support systems. Transportation is a big issue, whether they're dealing with other issues such as homelessness or mental health or substance abuse. Those all take into account how long someone's going to need to be in the program. So there's a lot of different factors, but we shoot for a 6-month time period.
Thank you. We have a question from Pat about assistive technology. Is there an AT assessment conducted, and if so, at what milestone?
I can take that one. So we don't have a specific like AT assessment completed, but we do look at AT needs throughout the assessment process and throughout the CRCE process. And we commonly refer and work directly with the AT department within VR within our areas and we bring clients ourselves and participate in those sessions to identify opportunities and options and tools and resources. So that is a integral part of both the assessment and CRC phase in terms of, and as well as the employment phase, to make sure that individuals are getting the appropriate tools in place to address their AT needs.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Rachel. Next question from Carla. At what point is the IPE with employment goal written? Is that in phase 3? On average, how long do you estimate that takes?
Okay. Oh, you want to take it, Carol?
No, go ahead, Ellen.
All right. So we in VR will can complete an assessment, the assessment through Brain Injury Support Services as part of our comprehensive assessment. So prior to IPE development, it can, but then we don't want to start the cognitive rehabilitation until the individual is in a plan with a goal identified. It can all happen after the plan, but sometimes we need to know the results of the assessment before we know which direction we're going to go with the services on the plan.
I would also add there is the partnership between the VR counselors and the staff is really, really important because we meet every 2 months. Once they come into CRCE, we meet every 2 months. And sometimes the goal changes. The goal that VR has put on their plan does change. And so it's having those conversations, everyone kind of coming together and talking about it and modifying that as needed.
Excellent. I'm going to address one more question and then we'll move on to center updates. Faith wants to know, do you have specific VR counselors who specialize in working with people with brain injuries? And if so, what type of additional training do they receive?
So what a terrific question. We wish we had specialized caseloads for traumatic brain injury. We wish we had enough individuals coming to us with brain injury so we could really have a case to have a dedicated caseload for TBI. We had that back in the day. We usually have one counselor who kind of manages our cases with traumatic brain injury. Correct me, Carol and Rachel, if that has shifted just a little bit. But my hunch would be that there's a primary counselor that would manage those cases. And really that individual is determined based on their level of expertise with traumatic brain injury. We don't have, unless they come to us with specialized training, there's not anything specifically that we do with that one individual staff person. We would love to have more frequent training on brain injury. It's kind of on our to-do list to bring that up, but not for a specific set of counselors, but for all of our counselors.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to transition us now to some brief center updates. So thank you so much for sharing today, presenters. It has been an amazing, amazing webinar. Next slide, please. So we're delighted to share a few updates about the DETAC. Thank you for, keep going, keep going. Next slide, please. Perfect. Friendly reminder that we have office hours this Friday. We apologize again that it was going to be facilitated on Good Friday, but Jill from NASHA will be here to answer your questions. And if you have questions for another presenter, we promise to relay the message back over to them or connect you with them. Next slide, please. Join us for our upcoming webinar in May, which focuses on strategies to promote cultural humility and awareness. You'll hear from my colleagues at the Association of University Centers on Disabilities, the Center for Leadership and Disability at Georgia State University, and the Washington Initiative for Supported Employment. So if you're curious on how to build equity in policy or programming, starting to address maybe cultural awareness or humility, then this upcoming webinar would be ideal for you. Next slide, please. We also have a new e-learning community that we are thrilled to share with you. This e-learning community is focused on financial inclusion. You will get resources. You will hear from experts across the country, including people with lived experience about how they are managing their assets. So please register. Space is limited. Next slide, please. As Jill mentioned in the initial portion of the presentation, one of our newest resources is focused on considerations in working with individuals with brain injury. So please check this out. It's an amazing resource geared at employment services providers. In addition to that, we have a DEI resource snapshot guide coming up full of resources and tools to help you as you build equity in policy and programming. We have the components of integrated employment service systems, which is a third-part brief focused on ending segregated work and focusing on advancing competitive integrated employment. And then we also have a brief coming up that's focused on rural transportation under the SIL arena. And then we have a learning management system course under our platform focused on assistive technology in employment. Next slide, please. So we'd just like to thank everyone for being here today. We'd love to thank our dynamic speakers. Thomas, your story is powerful. And if you have any questions or need some technical assistance from us free of charge, please reach out with that request. Next slide, please. We look forward to staying connected with you. We hope you have a great evening, and we hope to see you in our May webinar. So thank you, everyone. Take care.